Welcome back to our third Haunted October episode, and happy Halloween. Zombies Ate My Neighbors is a unique search and rescue type of adventure that can be enjoyed with 1 or 2 players. You are in a wide variety of maps with just a ton of different enemies. What appeals to many are its spooky yet often funky musical tracks, distinct sound effects, cartoonish animation, and the tight control of your character. As you search for people to rescue, you'll come across a bunch of different weapons like dishes, silverware, popsicles, soda cans, fire extinguishers, magic potions, decoy clowns, bazookas, and spiritual forces, with your main weapon being a water gun. With the top-down perspective and many locked doors or cracked walls between you and the multiple neighbors you need to rescue, the game requires the player to have more and more intuition and a real sense of direction throughout the game. Plus, only having access to a finite amount of keys or bazooka ammo to get through these obstacles, and some doors or walls not rewarding the player for going through, your decision making is also truly tested if you were to do anything more than just play the first few levels of this 48-stage Goliath. Like many players, I've casually tried out Zombies Ate My Neighbors in the past and always remembered it fondly for its atmosphere, arcade-like action, and distinct audio-visual experience. But what starts out as some simple fun shooting down enemies that you completely overpower quickly turns into many extremely high difficulty spikes that going head to head with is truly a genuine nightmare. An early example that surely held back lots of kids would be level 4, where you're completely surrounded by chainsaw-wielding foes that totally annihilate your health and lives if you do anything but set the occasional decoy and consistently just run for your life. The way many of your enemies chase you too is nothing you can easily manipulate and get away from either. You'll constantly be trying to put barriers or corners between you and the enemies just to barely get by. And while there are some dangerous enemies that a wall can protect you from as you go along, it seems to be less and less the case, with more enemies where it just doesn't matter. Like the persistent wall-jumping werewolves, gigantic ants that mimic your every move on the D-pad while trying to close the gap every fraction of a second, plus the red ones that move as fast as your character later on. These guys may actually make you scream. I mean, just look at how they move, it's so weird. The chainsaw guys can cut right through hedges and walls. Later on, you encounter vampires that won't stop at anything and constantly spawn near you while chipping away your health with bats. And it would be one thing if you could just pump some shots into these guys, but a bunch of them just take so many hits that it just becomes so hard to avoid taking damage. Plus, it can stress you out knowing that if you were to choose your bazooka, that just means with each shot you have one less thing to help you get through a wall on a later stage, or to take on one of the game's absurdly overpowered and stupidly unpredictable bosses. It doesn't take long to reach one of those, with level 8 featuring the Titanic Toddler. I mean, there's stuff you can explain, and then there's stuff you just have to look at for several seconds to have any concept of how these fights go down in this game. The idea of trying to take down an enemy like this with bazookas or soda cans just feels so stupid because of how much this thing just spazzes around the area. You'd end up wasting so many of your resources. So then you take your monster potion, one of the most important and completely game-altering items. It makes you invincible, plus gives you a punch attack, and important to note that this power-up seems to last significantly longer if you don't run around with your character. So if you can get into an area where a boss is going to overlap with you, spamming punch seems to be the safest and most reasonable way to do this. Even with that being said, look at how stupidly long it takes. It's just utterly insane. While the game is full of strong enemies that you can do your best to avoid, this is only the first example of a gigantic and unpredictable enemy that you have to defeat in order to move on. Let's talk a little bit more about how this game works. You start off with 10 victims to rescue, but with each one that is savagely murdered right in front of your eyes, there are that many less to rescue next time. While having more victims in a stage sounds like it would make things more difficult, that's not always the case, since the points can add up to give you more lives if you manage to still have all 10 victims. But after watching countless victims getting slaughtered in only an instant once they inch onto the screen while a wall separates you from them, you'll realize that simply getting through the game is beyond hard enough. Once you get down to having only a couple, or one victim left to rescue, when the last of them die, that means it's game over. While Zombies Ate My Neighbors does have a password feature, rewarded every 4 levels, they only start you back up with your water gun and not much else. And although it's a game that genuinely takes over 2, even 3 hours for even an experienced player to get through, it's a common strategy to do your damnedest to never get a game over, since having hordes of bazookas and potions end up being incredibly important when going against horrendously difficult enemies, bosses, and layouts later in the game. Level 20, for example. This was without a doubt a soul-crushing game ender for millions of players. You've got these tremor-like creatures that you need to defeat in order to get special skull keys to reach certain victims for the level to end. What started off for a while as begrudged acceptance of the game's level of challenge quickly turned into a flushed face and legitimate feeling of anxiety and fear that I was seriously going to unload all of my hard-earned weapons on this one enemy. That makes you ask yourself, what in God's name were these people thinking? I mean, in multiple aspects. Not only does this thing seem to come out in literally a matter of frames, it also has horrible hitboxes that can damage you just for being near it. Yet your weapons go right through this thing in just an astonishing way. You need to perfectly hit this thing's body where it comes out of the ground, because hitting it right in the face just isn't consistent enough at all. As you legitimately hit this thing with everything you have for minutes, and I mean minutes, you just find yourself asking, why? Why can't this enemy just take, I don't know, 10 or 15 hits with your weapons? Not well over 50. I mean, what's the point of that? The bazookas can take them out sooner, but when that's one of the most valuable things in the game, do you seriously want to try risk hitting this thing and wasting all of your ammo? You have to get in the most specific exploitive pattern for this to work. And at some point, your arm is being twisted so hard behind your back, you just say, okay, fine, after wasting over 100 items, I'll switch to the monster potion and sit here spamming the punch. I mean, it's just ridiculous, and we're only 20 levels into the game, and it's not the last time you see these guys. Although I sometimes like to take us through a level at a time, with a game like this, it's hardly an option. It's just so long and would without a doubt suffer from redundancy. But what's important to understand is that this game will chip away at your health, your resources, ultimately eating away your soul, exactly as a zombie would with your brain. There are so many points where you're wondering where exactly to go, as the infinitely respawning enemies just don't stop coming. And with all of these tight situations happening, the simple concept behind the control of 2 action buttons and 2 buttons that go through your weapons is just not good enough. With how many awkward and dangerous situations there are, this game desperately needs either a menu or to allow certain choices mapped to your last couple of buttons. And I don't say this as if it wasn't pretty solid for the time, but plenty of games use menus by this point, and when you're paging through like 10 choices with 2 buttons in a single direction, frantically trying to find the health or a certain weapon, at least designate what you want to one of your shoulder buttons and select, or for Genesis, your Z, C, and select. Basically, the game introduces some new enemies and concepts as you go, but with 48 levels, each time it gets worse and worse, like combining the absolute worst enemies in some of the worst spots. And for those that could manage to string together some completed levels and make it to level 36, any hopes you had of getting through this game just comes crashing right back down to earth. The level itself is annoying enough, with little spiders that you can only seem to hit with the water gun, but also stronger enemies where you'll need to constantly use something else. And just your typical late in the game Zombies Ate My Neighbors nonsense of trying to figure out where the hell to go, while you also try to figure out how am I going to survive. Here's the deal, you reach Dr. Tongue, that transforms into a huge spider that just spazzes about, taking away your health, loading the floor with sticky webs, soaking up a completely unbearable amount of damage, and this is where things come full circle for me. This level right here, paired with the fact that using the password puts you 15 minutes back and doesn't give you nearly enough resources to get through this fight, is why I was forced to pivot away from this game earlier this month. I'm dead serious. Super Castlevania coming out on the 10th was not part of the original plan. To me, this game had me so stuck that it made more sense to knock out 6 other videos before coming back to it. I kid you not, if you watch any walkthrough or playthroughs at all of this game, players get here and straight up empty the cupboard on this guy. I mean, they burn through multiple lives, health boxes, and just an absurd amount of ammo that you simply do not have if you use a password to come back here. With all of that being said, Friday the 30th I decided to tackle the Genesis port first, as I've heard and read that it's slightly easier for one reason or another. And what I can tell you about that is, to me, it's just a bunch of bullshit. Aside from their minor aesthetic differences, they seem like the exact same game. So when I managed to get to this guy again, with the momentum of this entire review at stake, this is what happened. I started off with a loose plan of just trying to go toe-to-toe with the guy, expecting to use a bunch of ammunition and my remaining first aid boxes on my last life. So no matter what happens, I simply could not fail on healing myself. And wouldn't you know it, a freaking chainsaw enemy found their way into the boss room and was trying to murder me and my dreams of finally getting through this stage. And I seriously end up running away with one segment of life left, trying to flip through to find my health with my sanity hanging by a thread. Once I was able to heal myself and lured the chainsaw enemy away, this is where I had to decide, are we going to play this the long way or just get in there with the monster potion and swing for the fences? I decided it's time to get in there and just do my damnedest with the monster potion. All I can say is, look at how long I'm punching this guy. Does this even seem playable to you? This is like borderline broken design we're talking about. I mean, tell me, please make this make sense. Oh wait, we already know it's because of the rental store fears back in the day of a player finishing the game during the rental period, because God forbid that the player actually just enjoys playing through the game to buy it afterward. You don't need to make it feel downright impossible to get through. And even after all of this punching, look, my monster potion ran out, and at this point my mind is racing to think about healing and just grabbing something that'll do damage. And since this thing is right on top of me, I pull out the weed whacker and a prayer. And let me tell you, I haven't felt relief quite like this in a long time. When I saw this thing actually explode right in front of my eyes, with just half of a life bar left too. Completely drained is also how I felt after this, because even though this absolutely sadistic challenge was over, there are still 12 levels left. And no, they don't get any easier. Whether it's completely overwhelming you with tough to defeat enemies, spreading things out in tricky or unintuitive ways, or releasing hordes of enemies that you can't even outrun, Zombies Ate My Neighbors makes it painfully obvious that they seriously never wanted anybody to have a chance at beating their game. And with walkthroughs literally revolving around the assumption that you're starting from level 1 and gathering all potential supplies from there, it's just not a fair thing to ask from anybody. For longtime viewers hearing this ranting about what makes getting all the way through Zombies Ate My Neighbors so horrendous, you might be wondering how it compares to many of the other difficult games featured on the channel. And that's where this game is just different. Like, it's not a matter of understanding how your character controls and using those skills to get through the game. It's much more about knowing how to do something as opposed to just being good enough with your character to do it. You need to forego the password feature, start from level 1, know where vitally important items are, such as the health, bazookas, and others, but also where to specifically use them and how to use them. In other words, this is going to take time. Brute force, skill, and willpower isn't enough in this game. You need resources. You have to know the game, and you have to get your strategies down. As much as I wanted to slay both of these games in time for Halloween, I was only unfortunately able to get just beyond level 40. But when your continue attempts take 15 to 20 minutes each with a password feature that virtually renders itself useless once you're beyond halfway through the game, I have simply run out of time. But this won't be the last of Zombie Ate My Neighbors. That is a guarantee. Believe me, revenge will be had. In fact, I used what time I had for one more try this morning and went for it again on the Super Nintendo version. And you know what? It was going amazing. I was being extremely conservative and precise with my weapons and health, to the point that I actually got to level 35 with 4 lives, 8 first aids, hundreds of bazooka shots, 5 monster potions. I was completely decked out to destroy the level 36 spider boss with no problem, especially if I just committed to using a monster potion or 2. I would have been moving on to level 37 with 4 lives, 8 first aids, and completely decked out. The only problem is that I was unfortunately down to only 1 victim left. Not because I didn't hustle or that I was careless when trying to get them, but just complete and utter garbage that felt totally out of my control. And I managed to keep 1 victim going for a few levels in a row. I just needed to successfully get the one on level 35. And you know what happened? I equipped the fast sneakers just in case and made a 2-hour run ending mistake. When you lose your victims, you don't lose a life. The game is over, and all of that vitally important gear that I accumulated by playing almost flawlessly for 2 hours is gone as well. I can already feel it that this is going to be a great October 1st episode for the next series of Halloween specials, so mark your calendar. By October 1st of 2021, zombies on the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, all 48 levels, are going down. If you're still in the mood to watch more spooky, tough games, keep in mind this channel has ghosts and goblins, ghouls and ghosts, Super Ghouls and Ghosts, and earlier this month we got Castlevania 4 and Castlevania Bloodlines. So I hope you guys enjoy that. Until next time, take care, and happy Halloween.